So tonight, someone really has to tell Wizards of the Coast that it's okay to stop writing the game. And someone really has to tell Monty Cook not to touch my fucking dice. And someone is going to tell me all about Pokemon. This is the Angry GM, live and unscreened. Welcome to my angry show. I'm live and I'm unscreened. I'll tell you how to run great games. I'll rant and rage and scream. It's pretty much the greatest show about an RPG. It's got all you'd ever want. There's just one thing that I need a theme song. I'm holding out for an intro till I get a great song. It's gotta be good, it's gotta be mad, it's gotta be 40 seconds long. I need a theme song. I'm holding out for an intro by someone who can sing. It doesn't have to be great, it doesn't have to be good. Anything would be better than this. Word of warning, I am the Angry GM. I am not the friendly GM. I am not the polite GM. I am not the cuddly GM. I am here to dispense harsh truths and give you RPG advice with attitude, whether you want it or not. If you can't handle that, if you're easily offended, and if you don't like swears, because I don't know how to pronounce an ampersand, you probably want to step out at this point. Actually, you probably want to step out about 10 minutes ago before I started the intro, but there you go. So, to start off, in tonight's news item, Wizards of the Coast earlier this week released a new playtest version of the Ranger. So we can all start playtesting D&D next by trying out the Ranger class. Oh, wait, didn't we already do this whole playtest thing like 2 years ago? For 2 years straight? So seriously, in the Unearthed Arcana column on Wizards of the Coast website, they actually released a new version of the Ranger, which they're referring to as a playtest. It's 5 playable levels of a new Ranger. And they say, and I quote, "Does this playtest mean we're changing the Ranger as presented in the player's handbook? No, not in the least. This is merely an attempt to gauge how much interest there is in moving back to the core definition of the Ranger, then attempting to shift it a bit to make a more distinct class." In other words, no, we're not changing the Ranger. We just want to know if people might be interested in unchanging the Ranger and then rechanging the Ranger. It's just like, what the hell is going on, Wizards? I mean, you wrote the Ranger and you tested it. Why are you suddenly deciding to re-release it? And they go ahead and they say that, okay, the Ranger is not really living up to our what people want. It's not satisfying players, and it's not reaching sort of the right power level. And once again, I thought those were things that should have been discovered in the last 2 years of playtesting things, but apparently not. Apparently that's not the sort of thing they were looking for. I mean, the real problem, and they start looking at the definition of the Ranger, and the definition of the Ranger actually goes back to sort of it's Tolkien, okay? And in Tolkien, the Ranger were these wandering sort of wild protectors of civilization who were not a part of civilization, the Westernists, the Numenor, whatever the hell they were called. Aragorn, they forsook civilization and they wandered the wilds to fight evil monsters. They were basically, I don't know, they were like nature-y paladins. And that's the thing, so the core definition of the Ranger is just adventurer, is like a wild person. And that really isn't strong enough to build a class around, especially what really throws it into sharp relief is when you look at the background options in 5e. You could easily build sort of the magic using Ranger as a cleric with the survivalist background or whatever. I'm not going to pull out the book, but whatever the hell that background is for Outlander or Outcast or whatever, or you could build the skirmishy type Ranger as a rogue with that background, or you could build the really powerful warrior Ranger as the fighter or barbarian with that background. It's Ranger isn't really a class in and of itself, except that it's it's become this sort of specific set of abilities, and nobody can quite agree on what the abilities are. Does the ranger have a pet? Doesn't the ranger have a pet? Does the ranger have clerical ability, or spell casting, or doesn't the ranger have spell casting? Is the ranger a really good archer? Is the ranger a really good 2-weapon fighter? And can you have a ranger that isn't an archer or isn't a 2-weapon fighter? So looking over this, it looks like they've decided to well, I'm looking at their approach, and their approach seems to be, let's throw a whole bunch of shit at the wall and see if this stuff sticks, which seems to be the last 20 approaches to writing a ranger. I would like to point out that one of the first level abilities that the ranger gets is an ability called Ambuscade, and I had to actually look this up. I was going to make fun of wizards for just inventing a word for ambush, but it turns out Ambuscade is a real word. It means ambush, and it's outdated and no one uses it anymore. Otherwise, the other major change is that now the ranger gets a spirit companion, and the spirit companion is basically it's sort of like the ranger can say, hey, spirit companion, do a thing, and then once in a while the spirit companion will give them temporary hit points or give them advantage on attacking a foe or whatever. So it's basically honestly, it's like channel divinity or rage or one of those other every so often abilities, and that's all it is. They don't seem to get a pet anymore. Oh, here's the other one. I love this ability. I have to call specific attention to it. And I'm going to recommend you check this out. But Skirmisher Stealth, okay? And I'm going to actually read this out loud because I have a comment on this, okay? Beginning at 2nd level, you combine speed and stealth in combat to make yourself hard to pin down. You're difficult to detect even if you attack or otherwise take actions that would normally reveal your presence. That's the fluffy shit. At the start of your turn, pick a creature you're hidden from. You remain hidden from that creature during your turn, regardless of your actions or the actions of other creatures. I love that, okay? Right then and there, okay? Without going any further into it, because of the way this is worded, that implies that I could say, okay, that goblin over there, I am hidden from that goblin, and I can walk right up and punch that goblin right in the face, because regardless of any actions I take, I can just walk up, bam, punch the goblin in the face, and then the goblin will have no idea that I was there during the turn. Okay, now, it does specify that at the end of the turn, creatures do become aware of you, but you do get a bonus action to hide again from the creature if you don't, or, as long as you fulfill the conditions for being hidden. Like, you can't still be standing in front of the goblin. But conceivably, with 30 squares of movement, you can run out from behind a building straight at a goblin, run 15 feet, punch the goblin in the face, run 15 feet back, and the goblin will never know you were there. He won't even know what the hell happened. Okay? By a strict wording of that. That is an awesome ability. Okay? But anyway, the real thing is, like, what the hell is Wizards of the Coast doing? I mean, they're releasing one adventure for 5th edition every couple of months. They're not really releasing any new material, and now they're already rewriting the Ranger, which they insist that they're not going to do anything with. It's just, we're not going to rewrite the Ranger, we're not going to change it, even if this is overwhelmingly popular, we're not going to do anything with it. So then what the hell does this even exist for? Is this just, hey, for funsies, here's 5 levels of a playtest Ranger that you can play and then go back to playing the real Ranger? The other oddity about the Ranger, by the way, is that for hit dice, it gets 2d6 hit dice per level. And that means that it gets twice as many hit dice as any other character. So it can basically spend twice as many hit dice in a day. That's interesting. Even there's no other class that can do that, not even the Barbarian. The Barbarian only has 1 hit die. But I don't want to get into a big mechanical analysis of this whole thing. And, I'm going on for a long time now. But basically, it's like, what is the point? Why are we already rewriting classes? And why didn't they, if the Ranger was so subpar, why didn't they catch it the first time around? Wizards, what the hell is going on? Okay, your game is done. It's released. Leave it out there. Recently, I ran The Strange at a convention, and The Strange, I'm sorry, I should give it its proper name. Monty Cook presents Bruce Cordell's The Strange by Bruce Cordell and Monty Cook. Okay, The Strange is a really awesome role-playing game, and I've already talked about why I like it for the most part. But it does this thing that has become this trend in role-playing games, and it's really got to stop, okay? Dear game designers, stop taking my fucking dice away, all right? I know I'm a game master. I know it is my job to magnanimously entertain the masses, to gather everyone to my table and present a fair and balanced challenge and make everybody happy, regardless of my own personal enjoyment or opinions. That's all fine. I'm fine with the game master as entertainer / game facilitator. But I'm also a gamer. Okay? I mean, that's why I game. That's why I got started, okay? I like rolling dice. And I don't understand why games like The Strange and Numa Numa and Dungeon World all feel the need to take the dice away from the game master. Except that I sort of do understand why this is happening. I understand what people are going for. There's this sort of belief, this idea that, number one, the GM is not a participant in the game. The GM should be like this basically just a trustee. The GM should exist solely for the entertainment of the players. That is why the GM is there. And as much control as possible should be left in the player's hands. And the way to do that, or one of the ways to do that, is to make the GM not a gamer. That emphasizes it, okay? The GM's not playing a game. The GM doesn't get to roll dice. The GM doesn't get to have fun. The GM is just there to take in whatever the players give him and then to respond, to react, okay? It's this whole idea of narrative control, and that the narrative control has to be shared. But in sharing, it doesn't also need to be taken. It's a myth that the GM has absolute narrative control over the game, okay? The fact of the matter is, I have no narrative control over the game because the 5 most powerful, most interesting, most important characters in that story, I cannot control. And they are also the audience. They are not just the protagonists. So whatever they do, I have to respond to. If they're not doing it, I can't respond to it, okay? So it's not about narrative control. It's just about this sort of petty idea of, well, let's emphasize the fact that the GM behind the screen, he's not the game. He's not playing anything. He doesn't have to have fun. So to hell with that. Stop taking my dice away. And you know what? There's another problem. Okay? There's this idea that the dice are somehow the opposite of story. Okay? Here's why dice exist in role-playing games. Let me explain it to you. Okay, when we read a novel or watch a movie or a TV show, okay, and we're just the audience, we don't know what's going to happen. That's part of why we watch the show or the movie or the novel or whatever the hell it is we're doing, okay? That's called narrative tension. Okay, and that's what draws us in, the uncertainty in the outcome. And even if we don't know, even if we sort of, okay, the good guys are going to win. You know, the Avengers are going to save New York City from the Hammer guy before he can kill Planet Judi Dench or whatever. I don't know, whatever movie I'm talking about. Okay, we know that's going to happen, but we still don't know precisely how, and we don't know what the heroes are going to have to give up in the course of that. Okay? That's where tension comes from, and that's why this stuff is exciting. The dice are there because the audience of a role-playing game is also the protagonist, okay? And the creator of the game is also the antagonist, okay? So we're all playing these dual roles, and we're sort of making up the story as we go. If we could just make up whatever we want without any sort of element of random chance, we completely rob ourselves of most of that narrative tension, which is why the dice exist. Now, as a GM, I like narrative tension too. I like not knowing how things are going to work out. And there is just an inherent excitement in picking up a die and rolling it to see whether or not I'm actually going to kill one of the PCs. That's an exciting moment for me. Whether it is that I'm cheering to kill the PC or hoping not to kill the PC. When that 20 comes out, maybe I will feel excited because, haha, I finally killed him. Or maybe I'll feel a moment of dread. That's between me and the players, and that's, nobody's business but mine. But the point is, I like that moment too. So stop taking my dice away. And that's my rant for the night. Okay? Here's the thing. There are a lot of different geeky fandoms in the world, and nobody can keep up with them all. I recently learned that even though I have a lot of furries following me, I really don't know much about the furry fandom. And I find it fascinating. I love learning about other people's fandoms. And I think everybody loves learning about other people's fandoms. So each episode of this show, I am going to invite in a self-proclaimed expert on some fandom to sit and explain to me what it is they're interested in, what is their fandom all about, and to let us all know, and maybe to help someone who might be interested get started. And so in just a moment, once she joins in... All right, so I am joined by Shannon of the Gamers Table, and she is here to explain her fandom. And Shannon, what fandom are you going to be explaining to us?
We're going to talk about Pokemon, which is one of my favorite things to talk about. As most people know, Pokemon is everything. If you are into TV shows and you want to watch sweet cartoon, there's a Pokemon cartoon. If you're into card games like Magic, there's a collectible card game. If you're into video games, which is what we're probably going to mostly talk about because that's mostly where my fandom lies, they have had a series of video games since the early 90s.
Yep. And it really has become like a gigantic multimedia franchise at this point. But I think you're right. I think it's best just to focus on the video games. I think there recently a new iteration of the video games was released, right? Or is upcoming? Or am I wrong in that?
Upcoming. Pokemon. Are you talking about Pokemon Go?
Oh, yeah. That's what's been getting big news.
I cannot wait for that. I'm super excited for that. Like, the day I saw it, I just, like, smiled. I'm like, oh, my God, this is going to be the best thing ever. I'm going to actually, like, go outside and move around and do things. It's going to be terrible for my skin because I'm pale and burn. But, so Pokemon Go is, it's bringing the Pokemon games to real life. Basically, you download the app on your iPhone or Android. It's going to be on both. And you get to catch Pokemon in real life, which it makes you the trainer that you've been playing, or you might not have. You definitely haven't, Angry, but I've been playing since I was like 9 or 10.
Well, that's not fair. I've actually played almost 2 hours of one of the Pokemon games. I think Leaf Green or something. But anyway, okay, so let's roll it back then. Pokemon Go is obviously a completely different animal from the video game series. So if you had to explain in, let's say, 5 sentences what the Pokemon video game series was all about, like, how would you describe it to someone who had no idea what Pokemon are?
The Pokemon series is about a 10 or 11-year-old kid who is leaving home with nothing but a Pokemon and a pack full of useful items. You're going off on a journey to be the best that no one ever was. To catch them's your real test.
Would you say training them is your cause?
Training them is my cause. I wasn't sure how long I wanted to do, how far into the song I wanted to go. So anyway, you're going off to train your Pokemon, and if you're like me and you really just want to play the base game, you are defeating the gym leaders and eventually the Elite Four, which is in every Pokemon game that I've played, and I think all of them. There's a few I haven't played, a few generations that I missed out, but which there are 6 generations, in case you're wondering.
So the basic idea then is that you're wandering around the world capturing these little supernatural creatures and forcing them to fight with other people's supernatural creatures?
Right. A lot of it is you're wandering around in tall grass trying to find other wild Pokemon, which are just tiny little creatures, and you're trying to beat them within an inch of their life and then throw a ball at them and hope that they then become your Pokemon.
Okay. Which sounds, for kids.
Yeah. It's the perfect game for kids. But it's also a lot about leveling, and for me, I get like super into the strategy of it, and it's not necessarily about like beating everyone. It's just about having the best build, because it's like, okay, I know that this move isn't going to do anything, and in 5 levels, I'm going to get this other move, and I can't wait for that move, and I want to have like a diverse team. Because each Pokemon has a type. So, like, there's a fire type, an electric type, a ghost type. Now there's a fairy type, which they tell me is the strongest. But I've yet to have a decent fairy battle, so I haven't put one on my team yet. But yeah, basically you get to hold 6 Pokemon with you at all times, and if you play like me, those are the only 6 that you play, and you ignore the rest of your Pokemon. You just catch them so that you have the info in your Pokedex, because I'm a horrible person. If the Pokemon were real and had feelings, they'd be very sad.
Well, my understanding is that they're basically stored in digital form inside computers, sort of like Professor Moriarty in Star Trek The Next Generation, where basically they're just locked into an infinite void of data when they're not being used, where they're conscious and probably slowly driven mad. Would you say that's an accurate description?
Yeah, that sounds about accurate. In the show, they kind of do it different. They have all the Pokemon and Pokeballs in whatever your... Or at least back when I still watched the show, which they only had 151 Pokemon when I watched the show.
More?
They have 719 Pokemon now.
That's absurd. That's absurd. Who can keep track of that?
And each Pokemon, now they have like... So before, you caught a Pikachu... And it was just a Pikachu. And now there's Pikachu boy and Pikachu girl. And there's shiny Pikachus. And some of them are different colors. So it not only are there 720, but there's also all these offshoots of those.
Okay. So, with all due respect, because I really believe in respecting other people's fandoms, that sounds terrifyingly bloated and complicated. So, like, if I wanted to get into it now, if I wanted to get started with the Pokemon games, is that even possible at this point?
I think it's still possible. I took a break for a really long time, and then I started playing again, and it's still just the basic game. Like, if you didn't know that there were 720 Pokemon and you were supposed to catch them all, I don't think they have that as their tagline anymore. I don't think "gotta catch them all" is as big of a deal. I play Pokemon X now, and it used to be your Pokedex wasn't filled until you caught the Pokemon, and now it's just you have to see them, and that's it. So that kind of helps it out a lot. So your Pokedex is filled by, like, whenever the professor, which is the person who gives you your Pokemon, whenever they will check your Pokedex, it counts it based off how many you've seen, not how many you caught. So it kind of lets off some of the pressure, and you don't really have to worry about having like a shiny Pokemon unless you're into that. I don't care about having the different iterations of Pokemon. I caught one Pikachu, and that's it. I mean, I call it other Pokemon, but
So it sounds like you can choose the way you want to play the game. I mean, you could play to beat all the gym people and the Elite Five or whatever it was you said, or you can play to fill your Pokédex, or you can play to compete against other people, or play to capture every iteration of everything in the world.
right. That's definitely true. There's always like a side quest. So if you watch the cartoon, back in the olden days, there was Team Rocket, and they were always coming around and messing around with Ash. And
Well,
so in the game,
they were the good guys, right?
No.
Well, because I was led to believe by their theme song that they're protecting the world from devastation and uniting all people in one nation.
I did always like that the bad guys were all about good things, and then later on, there's like another member of Team Rocket, because the two that you see are just like mess ups, they're screw ups. I just hesitated on swearing on an angry stream. But they're screw ups, and so other teams of Team Rocket are like, no, you've been doing it wrong this entire time, and they say the real one, and it's like, oh, that's horrible. They are the bad guys. It makes sense now. But there's always sort of a different team that's going after you. And Pokemon Platinum, which was the 4th generation, they had Team Plasma, and in the current generation, it's Team Flare, which I'm not really sure what their deal is yet, because I'm in the middle of the game.
Now, you keep referring to different generations. Are these like different sequels of the game?
Yeah, so the games are set up by generation, just to make it easier. So, like, you'll remember, Red and Blue were basically the same game, and then they came out with Pokemon Yellow, which was like the director's cut version.
Wait, that was the one where you got the Pikachu you could actually see following you around, right?
Yeah, you could turn around and talk to him, and he'd like make a smiley face if he liked you. And at first he was always like growling or like frowning at you because he didn't like you. But then later he'd get little hearts, and it was cute. But yeah, so that's Generation 1. And it's basically, or at least initially, generations are set up by, there's 2 games that are released, and then they release the director's cut version of that game, and that's a generation.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So what is the current generation then? If I wanted to get started, what would be my choices to go out and buy for the guy? I assume the DS or the 3DS?
It's a 3DS. That's the current generation. The current generation is Pokemon X and Y.
Okay.
Yeah, which that
Did they run out of colors?
I think they did. They went to black and white, and then they're like, "Well, now what do we do?"
Wasn't there a black white or a black 2 and a white 2?
Yeah. So they went black and white, and then black 2 and white 2, which those are actual sequels. They take place. They're the only games that take place in the same area.
Oh,
well, excluding, so Generation 1, you're in Johto, you're in Kanto. Generation 2, you're in Johto, but then after you defeat the 8 gym leaders in Johto, you go to Kanto and defeat their 8 gym leaders.
And I assume these words you're making up right now are the names of like countries or regions in the Pokemon universe.
Kanto is actually an actual region in Japan, which I found out today when I was like, I should probably read something about Pokemon if I'm going to talk about Pokemon. So that was something I found out. Don't know that much about Japan. But yeah, so that was Generation 2. You get to go to 2 different regions, but other than that, black and white and black 2 and white 2 are the only ones that take place in the same region.
Okay.
And they are a sequel. It's 2 years later, and you get to see, like in black and white, you have 2 rivals instead of just 1. And in Black 2 and White 2, one of the rivals is the one that gives you your Pokemon. And the second rival is a gym leader later on. Which I never played Black and White, but I played White too. So I wasn't in on any of those in-jokes.
Okay, and final question. If I did want to get started today and I was going out to the store to pick up either Pokemon X or Pokemon Y, what's the difference between the two? Why would I choose one over the other?
They're basically the same game. That's why they're divided by generation. They have the same plot. The only difference is X will have a certain number of Pokemon that you can only get in X, and Y will have a certain number of Pokemon that you can only get in Y. But they also have a lot that are in both.
Oh, okay.
So basically, the scheme from the get-go was buy both games so that you can get all the Pokemon, and then you have to trade with yourself or with your little brother if you have one, which I do, and we always got opposite games so we could collect them all.
So, well, thanks very much for introducing us to your fandom. And but before you go, you claim to be a Pokemon expert.
Yes, obviously.
Mm-hmm. And
these are my credentials.
See, unfortunately, even though I know very little about Pokemon, I am actually an expert in everything.
Naturally.
Yeah, so I thought that we could just to settle whether or not I'm a better expert than you, I thought we could have a little contest.
Oh, so okay.
So I've gone ahead and I've gathered 6 questions about the Pokemon franchise, and I've randomly sent 3 of them to you and 3 of them to me, and I haven't seen any of the answers yet. And I thought we could go back and forth, and whichever one of us gets more questions right, obviously gets declared the greater Pokemon expert.
That sounds fair enough.
All right. Considering I know nothing about it, I mean, this should be easy for you, right?
Yeah, man, you're going down.
All right, so why don't you start with one of the questions that I sent you? And,
okay. All right. The name Pokemon is the Romanized contraction of the Japanese brand name Poketo Monsuda, and was chosen because Pokemon are monsters that you can carry around in what?
So they're monsters you can carry in your something that sounds like Poke or Poketo. I'm going to say pocket or pockets.
That is correct.
Okay. And now I'm going to ask you one of these randomly selected questions here. Okay. So Game Freak, the company that published the Pokemon video game series, began its life as a gaming magazine. Who was the illustrator for that magazine?
Probably the same people who did the cartoon.
Oh, I'm sorry. The correct
know.
answer is Ken Sugimori. Ken Sugimori. That's okay. I mean, you've still got more chances, and like I said, I know nothing about Pokemon. So, all right, throw another one at me.
Okay, all right. In each Pokemon game, a Pokemon professor introduces the main character to the world of Pokemon. These Pokemon professors, including Professors Oak, Elm, and Juniper, are named after what?
Oak, Elm, and Juniper. Oh, those are named after trees. I'm going to go with trees.
That's right.
Okay. All right. That's 2 for me. None for you so far, but here's your next one. Okay.
Maybe we should trade questions.
Well, no, I mean, it was random. And dice are fair. As I already said, dice are the great equalizer.
That is true. Okay.
So, Pokemon series creator Satoshi Tajiri, okay, you know him. He said he was inspired by his hobby of insect collecting. So, if Tajiri wanted to catch them all, approximately how many insect species would he have to collect on Earth? If Tajiri wanted to collect all known insect species on Earth, How many would he have to collect? I mean, it's a simple Pokemon question. There's bugs in Pokemon.
Yeah. Let's see. Probably way more than 720.
Can you be more specific?
I'm going to say 5,379.
I'm sorry. The correct answer is actually, well, if he wants to catch all the known species, he would have to catch approximately 900,000. But
That's
it
so
turns
close.
out we're not really sure how many insect species are on Earth. So we estimate there are anywhere between 2 and 30 million. And I would have accepted any number in that range.
Oh, okay.
All right.
I knew I should have gone higher.
Yeah, a little bit. All right.
All right.
So third randomly determined question for me now.
Okay. At the start of each Pokemon game, you get to choose a starter Pokemon from one of 3 different types. Water, grass, and what hot-headed type?
I actually kind of cheating because I did play one of the games, and I think I picked the Charlizard. Or
Charmander.
Yeah, whatever. So he was a fire type. So I'm going to say fire.
You got it. That's 3 out of 3.
All right. But you know what? I'm going to give you a chance here because I think maybe the dice weren't really in your favor. So
I'd hate to go 0 and 3. That'd be horrible.
Well, yeah, exactly. So this is triple or nothing, okay?
All right.
All right. So the third installments of the Pokemon franchise were Pokemon Ruby and Pokemon Sapphire.
Right.
Chemically speaking, what is the difference between a Ruby and a Sapphire?
One is red and one is blue, chemically.
That is correct.
Yeah, really?
Actually, yes, it is. Both rubies and sapphires are corundum, which is an aluminum oxide. The only difference is that rubies only come in red because of chromium impurities, and sapphires can be any other color because they contain impurities other than chromium, like iron and titanium. So, very good. I guess we tied then, because I said triple.
Yeah! Good
so
job.
I don't have to take your expert title away.
Yes, we're co-experts now.
We are co-Pokemon experts.
Yes, now we can write the next great Pokemon research paper together.
Indeed.
Or update the Wikipedia article. I think that's what Pokemon experts do.
Well, isn't there a Pokédex website out there?
Yeah, my favorite's Bulbapedia. So if you do end up playing the game, and you're like, when is this Charmander gonna get Fire Spin? You can go to Bulbapedia.
Question that we've all asked at one time or another.
I definitely have. Or if you're just starting out and you're like, when are any of these Pokemon going to have a useful move that's not Tackle?
Or Splash. Let me tell you, okay, I had, this is one of the 2 experiences that stopped me from playing Pokemon. I was playing
Magikarp.
Yes, some guy, he's like, I'm going to sell you this rare Pokemon for like 45 Pokédollars or whatever. Or
no!
He traded me something. So I bought the damn thing, and it was a friggin' goldfish, and it had one move, and the move didn't do anything.
Magikarps are the worst.
Right. Okay, no, I'm fine with that. I'm fine that there's a joke character that does nothing. But what I'm saying is the game screwed me.
Yeah, it's always best to catch a Magikarp in the wild. If you actually take the time to level that Magikarp and get it to evolve into Gyarados, that Pokemon is freaking awesome. It's this huge dragon lizard water snake thing. And it's one of the more powerful Pokemon in the game. But
and that actually is the biological life cycle of the goldfish. It will eventually grow into a giant dragon snake lizard thing.
Exactly. This is all based on real life.
Which is why there's evolution in the game, right?
Yeah.
Unless you buy it in the South, then they had to change it to intelligent design. Kakuna is being intelligently redesigned. Kakuna
God has granted your Kakuna into a Beedrill.
Hey, I got it right.
Yeah, you did. Good job. I'm proud of you.
So Shannon, thank you very much. If people want to find out or want to follow you in your other endeavors, where can people go?
If you want to hear me talk about Pokemon endlessly, you can go and follow me on Twitter. I am at Shannon_Steele. If you would like to hear me talk about tabletop gaming, I do that. We release episodes every Tuesday at gamerstable.com.
Which is actually a really great podcast, except for your predilection for actual plays, which I can't stand. Not just yours, all actual plays.
Well, our actual plays are a little different. We actually just started releasing our most recent one. It's Shadowrun. We do them more like role-play dramas. So you get some of the game mechanics, but a lot of it's definitely more about the story. And our editors, Dan and Eric, they go through a lot of trouble making it sound really good. There's music, there's special effects. And
as opposed to this podcast. Trust me. Thank you very much. I'm going to let you go, and I'm going to take a question from the audience, and then I think we're going to call it a night on the inaugural episode extravaganza of Angry GM Live and Unscreened, or whatever the hell I've decided to call this.
All right. See you later.
Thanks a lot, Shannon.
No problem.
All right. So that was Explain Your Fandom. Thanks a lot, Shannon. And check out Gamestable. I definitely recommend them. And I'm going to go ahead and end this by we're going to go through the Q&A here and see if we can find a question to answer to end the night with. Armin Mobaseri, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, asks, what's wrong with Out of the Abyss? Out of the Abyss is, of course, the most recent D&D module that was released. D&D module, yeah. And I honestly can't say for sure what's wrong with all of Out of the Abyss because I've only so far started running the first chapter. But let me tell you how the adventure starts out, okay? The adventure starts out by taking the players and putting them in a prison cell and taking all their equipment away and locking them in the Underdark. They are the prisoners of the Drow. Inside the cell with them are 10 different complex NPCs. Each NPC has its own secrets, has its own agenda, and, as just a fun extra quirk, has its own insanity. Okay? These 10 NPCs are on camera for the entire beginning of the game, and in fact are expected to escape with the player characters. So right off the bat, the first scene of the game is, let me introduce to you these 10 characters, these 10 NPCs, and now we're going to have one big old gangbang interaction for as long as we want to, so that you can get to know all of these different 10 NPCs. All at once, mind you. There's no separation because you're all locked in a cell, and there's really nothing else the players can do. The players have basically been imprisoned, all of their agency has been taken away, and they're locked in a room with 10 complex characters that the GM gets to play. Okay, now, number one, that's not a whole lot of fun for the players. I mean, yeah, some players really do get off on that whole interaction thing, but until the GM starts doing things, the players are just locked in the cell to interact, and they kind of are expected to. But on top of that, they have to keep track of who all these NPCs are, and that means that the game gets to start with this long introduction of, in the cell, you see these 10 different people. Oh, and by the way, this is what happened, and this is how you got here. So you have all the flavor text that sets up the adventure, plus all of the flavor text for the 10 different NPCs, which the players all have to keep straight, who are all, by the way, these quirky, unusual races, like Neblin, and there's a myconid spore thing, and there's twin dark gnomes, and then there's another dark gnome who behaves like a light gnome, not a dark gnome, and it's just a pain in the ass. As a GM, you have to keep these 10 different NPCs in your head through the whole time. You have to keep their agenda straight, their insanity straight, and you have to be able to role-play them all in this scene, and they have interactions with each other. I mean, realistically, they would. You're all in one room. Okay, that's the opening scene. And you're expected to ferry these NPCs throughout a jailbreak. The jailbreak itself, once the players get out, and the DM is given these 3 or 4 different scenarios that DM can just feed to the players so that they can get out. Two of which involve basically just having an event set the players free. So they really don't even get to decide their escape. But that's to be fair, those are sort of fail safes, and if the players come up with their own clever ideas, you really should let that. And there's some advice in the book about how to handle that. But for the most part, once the players escape and do a jailbreak, it's simply a bounce around, running from encounter area to encounter area, fighting basic drow and Quagoths until you find your equipment, and then take the elevator down, and then go into the wilderness of the Underdark. That's chapter 1, okay? Now, and ultimately, that's all I know about this adventure, and it's already enough to tell me that I'm not sold on the adventure. The first chapter of the adventure has got to be the best chapter of the adventure. It's got to be the thing that keeps people coming back. And it starts with a screw job, and then an incredibly complex scene that is incredibly difficult to run, incredibly difficult for players to keep track of, and then mainly just a boring dungeon delve. During which the players mostly feel powerless anyway. So that's ultimately my problem with Out of the Abyss. Maybe it gets good in chapters 2 through 12, but you know what? And I'll find out because I'm going to keep running it for encounters, but I wouldn't blame anybody for not sticking that out. And that's the end of it. So anyway, this has been the first episode of the Angry GM live and unscreened. And so further episodes will come out on the 15th and the 30th of every month at 9 p.m. Central Time. And then they'll be released on YouTube later as a recording. And then thereafter, I am going to try and get all the audio out of this as a podcast. I think it's all been recording separately in Audacity. We will find out. So thanks, everybody, for hanging out. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you back in 2 weeks. All right. Have a great night. Game Angry.